Hi there, ladies. It is me, Mrs. Mattingly, and I am here, even though I'm not here with you, to go over this lesson, which I told you the other day that we were going to finish up lesson 2 because we didn't get to finish doing all the notes for it. We ran out of time. But surprise, I'm actually on retreat with some of your fellow classmates, so we'll have to finish up the notes for that next week when I return and when they return. But today we're going to look at lesson 1. So we're going to go backwards a little bit so that we can stay up together and be ready, as I told you, to watch the film hopefully sometime late next week or early the week after that. So we're going to get started, and to begin, I need you to go ahead and find the notes for lesson 1 in the content library. They are there for you, and there's a couple other items that you will also need, but I'm going to just ask you to get the notes for lesson 1 first, and then we'll go back to those as we get going through here. So the lesson 1 in the unit on sin and virtue is titled "What is Evil?" So it's looking at it a little bit more closely. And you might remember, those of you that I taught Paschal Mystery to last year, that we absolutely explored evil, and specifically natural, physical, social evils, as well as moral evil. And so we're not it's not completely a review of that, although that will come up, but we're going to look at it more in the lines of what sin is in relation to evil. So hang with me, okay? So first off, though, I kind of have, I want you to sort of just take a second to reflect and think about what your definition of sin is, and what it means to you. So I am going to ask you to pop over to the content library. If you would look at the handout that is called "What is Sin?" It looks like this in the concrete. And it is essentially a rating scale. It says to rate the following things on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being no sin and 10 being the most sinful. Now, I want you to notice that there are actually 19 possibilities. Look down there, 19 possibilities on here. So you're not going to have each one of them have a different number. In fact, you could have all of them be a 10 if you think all of these things are excessively sinful. Or you could have all of these things be a 1 if you think that none of these things are very wrong at all. So don't get hung up on evening the numbers out, okay? You could have 5 1s and 3 5s and 6 8s or whatever, and you could have no 10s and no 1s. You could have everything in the middle. You have to decide. 1 is no sin. It's not sinful at all. It's not a sinful act at all. And 10 is the most sinful. Okay, so think about it from that perspective, and I'm going to give you a couple minutes to work. So if whoever is subbing could pause for maybe just a couple minutes and let you think, because I really do want you to give some consideration to all these, and it's not something that can be done with just a little bit of time. So think about it for a few minutes, and then we'll come back. Okay, hopefully you were able to take those and take a few minutes to look at all of the numbers that you put down. And I will talk about this next week when we get back, because if you add up all your numbers, people who are higher have higher numbers. It can sort of say something about how you evaluate what is sinful in your life, and those who have lower numbers. But we'll talk a little bit about them next week. Church teachings recognize that the circumstances, as well as who you are, the persons involved, will affect how sinful an action is. So, don't get too hung up on it, but it's an interesting thing to think about. So the definitions then of sin and what is evil. I want you to take a second to consider. Evil is defined as what is morally bad or wrong, otherwise known as wicked or harmful, injurious or unlucky. Could also be disastrous, depending on what it is. It can also be used as a noun. It's also known as sin, or anything that causes us harm or pain. So just as a review, as I mentioned to you, what are some of the things that we think of? Natural evils, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, freak accidents, disease. All of those things are results of the imperfection of human nature. Not just human nature, but nature. Then moral evils. Moral evils are when you intentionally hurt someone, you do something. I always would tell you in pastoral mystery, there's two things you have to have. You have to know it's wrong, and you have to do it on purpose. Know it's wrong, do it on purpose. Two important things. They're deliberate bad choices. You intentionally did it. Okay, some examples down there at the bottom. People who are wealthy exploiting those who are poor. If you lie to cover for yourself, you know you've done wrong and you try to hide it. So sin then is described as an absence of good, or an action that's somehow contrary or against God's call to love others, not only others but ourselves. It could also be an inaction. In Scripture, sin is a lot of times referred to as missing the mark. You'll see that written in Scripture, being off-center or failing to love. There's an Old Testament word meaning shata, which means to miss, and hamarsha from the New Testament, which means falling short, fall short. And I've got the little graphic of the hunter who misses his mark. That idea being that I've sinned, I've missed the mark, I've missed what I was supposed to be doing. Sin can also be a hardness of heart, meaning like a closing off from other people. It could be failing to respond somehow to something that we see as a very obvious human need. That could very well be sin. So kind of like being a bystander. So there are a couple different types of sins that we have to be aware of. And one of them is a sin of commission. All right, so that's purposely doing an action that is harmful to oneself or another. And I just think this picture of the little girl is pretty awful. But again, it's purposely doing it. Some examples. Saying something hurtful to someone, hitting someone or slapping them like a sibling. A sin of omission is where you are leaving something out. It's not doing an action that is called for, not doing something. An example might be if you know someone's gossiping, but then you do it anyways. You know that something is wrong and you do it anyways. And you ignore the fact that it's happening. Ignoring somebody who you know is hurting, maybe because it's just too much trouble or too much of a bother to get involved. That's a sin of omission. You're walking around, you are... you see litter, you know it's there, you don't pick it up. You do it and you choose to do it. It's a sin of omission. Okay? So we've looked at a few case studies this semester already, but we've got one more to look at. Actually, a couple more, but this is another one. In the content library, you'll find a handout that says another case study, or the title is Sin Case Study in the content library. So this is taken from a Supreme Court case, and I'm sure that this one will make you just as unhappy and upset as the others. In this case, two girls, ages 12 and 15, spent substantial periods of recreational time with their neighbor at his horse barn, riding and caring for his horses. Betraying the trust this relationship established, the neighbor, who was an older man, sexually abused both girls for a period of more than a year. Following the man's conviction and imprisonment for these offenses, the girls, along with their parents, brought this action against the man and his wife for damages, contending that the wife's negligence made her as well as her husband responsible for the injuries. The man assumed responsibility for both the injuries that he inflicted on the girls by his sexual abuse. His wife, however, denied that under any circumstances that she should be found negligent for the girls' injuries. This case presents the issue of whether a wife who suspects or should suspect her husband of actual or possible sexual abuse of the neighbor's children has any duty of care to prevent such abuse. Lots and lots of issues and questions, okay? So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and finish reading. All right, there's a couple more pieces of information. And then you'll see that there's questions down here at the bottom. All right, I want you to tell me, first of all, what are the crimes? Are they sins of omission or commission? What are some things that could explain why Mary didn't act? And then are there any hypothetical reasons, as well as issues with legally being responsible? So whoever is subbing, if you could also just pause at this point and allow the students to take a few more minutes to finish reading and then answer those questions. That'd be great. Okay, awesome. So you've hopefully considered all the scenarios with the two, the neighbors, and I'm sure that probably got you thinking, and it absolutely will make a lot of people upset, the idea that the wife didn't do anything about it, and maybe there were some reasons why she did, maybe there's some reasons why she didn't. We all could sort of say that there are possibilities and we don't really know the answer. It's another thing that we have to sort of rationalize. It's in our heart. Looking at what sin is and what we know of as sin, there are two different descriptions specifically in the Catholic Church that we think of. Mortal sins, which are so destructive that they mortally wound our relationship with God. They completely reject God, essentially. Mortal sins are things that it's very, very difficult to repair and fix our relationship with God. If we outwardly turn away from what we know is right, that's hard to challenge that. Venial sins are actions that weaken our relationship with God, but we can fix them a lot easier. If we plan a murder and plan to take someone's life, we know that this is wrong, we do so willingly, it's really, really hard to make up for that. And that's just a challenge. It's a mortal sin. A venial sin is, well, I know it's wrong, I did it anyways, and yeah, I realize it and I'm sorry for it. And it's usually things that, not a good thing, but they are things that we do slip up on regularly. I told somebody a lie or to get out of something, or I chose not to help when I could have, and those different kinds of things. The culpability then is the degree that we're responsible, and that can also be a determining factor on whether something is mortal or venial. All right. Sin then is a statement about how we treat our relationship with God. It doesn't describe God's relationship with us. All right, so specifically then, that leads us to your homework. So in the content, I'm sorry, it's actually in the collaboration space. You have an article, and it's called Missing the Mark. It's by Kevin Hendricks. And Kevin Hendricks is kind of just an average guy, but he wrote this a few years back, and I really like what it has to say about sin and the missing the mark, specifically that statement. So I want you to, number one, read the article first. You have to read it. And then in the collaboration space, which I'll show you really quickly, there is a place where I'm going to ask you, and here's your collaboration space, to post. So it's a tab separately, and it says Missing the Mark, okay, at the top of the tab right here. Here it is. All right, so then I have like a fake student there. Sally Smith is right there. All right, Sally Smith is not one of our students. But if I was one of our students, that is what I would write. So here are the two questions that you're going to want to respond to, and I have them here. So you're just going to want to go in here and just copy these, just like that. Copy, paste, create a new tab, and then type your name at the top, Amy Jones. Okay, we don't have a student named Amy Jones. Okay, but if your name was Amy Jones, that's what you put. So you're going to then copy and paste that there, and then you're going to write your response in the middle there, between the first and second one, and then below the second one to the article. But you have to read the article first, okay? So just as an idea of what you're doing, that is your homework. That is all I need you to do. And like I said, those of you, I know that those of you who are here thought we were going to finish up the lesson notes, but we will do that next week when all of our class is back, hopefully, and get us back on track. And again, I'm sorry. I wish I could have told you that I wasn't going to be here, but I didn't want to tell anybody who was going on retreat. So I am thinking of you and hoping that you guys have a nice day and a nice weekend. And I will see you back here on Monday. So